Vámonos. Eh, Profesor Leonard, ¿qué entiende usted por literacidad?
Bueno, son los procesos que en el aula de clases se logran a partir de lecturas no solo escritas y obviamente literales de textos, sino también de otros contextos, donde los muchachos desde la creación o autocreación propiamente de sus propias realidades, de sentidos, contrasentidos, tratan de entender su propio entorno, su propio mundo, a la luz de sus propias experiencias, aportadas desde apoyos que le dan los textos y la escritura.
Bueno, muchas gracias, profe. La siguiente pregunta es, ¿qué clase de lecturas usa usted en sus clases?
A ver, las lecturas que utilizo no son solamente de lectura y escritura, valga la redundancia, sino que también se evocan a hacer lecturas de iconografía, a hacer lecturas del entorno, a hacer lecturas de intratextuales, intertextuales, hipertextuales, para que los estudiantes vayan tomando posturas críticas alrededor
de esta entrevista es auscultar un poco sobre el término literacidad. Me gustaría saber qué entiende usted por literacidad.
En pocas palabras, podríamos decir que la literacidad es la cualidad que hace que un texto, un hipertexto, cualquier, entidad pueda ser leída o escrita.
Okay, my name is Bridget Flynn. I work at the Colombo Americano Medellin. It's a language institute and we teach English. The grades in which I teach are children, primarily preschool, and youth, teenagers of varying ages, and adults. My education level, I have a bachelor's degree in pedagogy, and I'm currently studying a specialization in bilingual education. I teach English. Okay, question 1. How do you carry out the process of learning of reading and writing in your school? Well, reading and writing are two of the 4 skills we focus on developing in our students and are the key factors to learning a language. In my school, we try to integrate different skills to develop the language in a task-based approach. So, for example, the students may read something and then have to write a response to what they read, or the students have to have a discussion about what they read. Reading is usually a means to add input either about a topic or for vocabulary and grammar development during a given lesson, while writing is usually implemented as an outcome of a lesson for students to put to use what they have learned. Being a language institute, reading and writing are implemented according to students' language level. However, it is different to work on writing with a child in level 1 than with a teenager or adult in level 1 because the child is still learning how to write. So with them, you are teaching both the language and about writing skills in general, and that also goes for reading as well. What do you understand for literacy? Okay. Again, because I teach a foreign language, literacy means something a little bit different for me, or that's what I think in my opinion. For me, it is just not simply the ability to read and write, but rather the ability to communicate in general. To what extent does a student's ability to read and write allow them to communicate in this foreign language? For example, the students might not be 100% literate in reading and writing English, and that's okay because it's a process and it takes time. But if they can understand others in English and communicate something to them or to someone in English, no matter how basic or with however many mistakes, then that is what literacy in a foreign language constitutes to me. What kind of readings do you use in your classes? Question 3. Well, this all depends on the student's level. I try to use as much authentic material as possible, although sometimes that means that I have to go through and modify the vocabulary or the grammar structures to help my students better understand the text. So it's not completely authentic, it's modified. The majority of the texts I use in class are short texts. Even in advanced courses, they may only be 2 pages at most. I mean, the structure of the classes, for example, like the time, the schedule, and the content that we have to teach in that short amount of time at my school don't allow us to really read lengthier texts like short stories or novellas or something like that. So some examples of the type of readings I use on a regular basis are articles, texts from foreign language books, blogs, brochures, essays. Number 4, do you think those readings are contextualized to your students' interests and modes of life? Well, the curriculum mandates that I cover certain topics during the duration of a course. Our curriculum is theme-based and not grammar-based. So this sometimes makes it difficult to contextualize them for my students' interests. However, I am lucky enough to have the autonomy to try to fit the themes and/or topics of the course to my students' interests and modes of life. This element of personalization is essential to helping the students to learn a foreign language. It's a great motivator and it prompts more interaction, which is very important in a foreign language class. I personally think that if I can teach the students about the world and then tie it into their own interests and way of life, then what they are learning will be all the more interesting and relevant to them. It may be a foreign language class, but it should go beyond the language and hopefully trying to contextualize that with their interests and their modes of life will help to do so. Question 5. Aside from text reading, do you use other resources to develop literacy? Um, I, I think I understand this question. I'm not sure. I think so. For me, storytelling is a great resource to developing literacy. If the students tell their stories or listen to other stories, it is very beneficial to them as well. So this storytelling may seem like it lends itself more to oral production, but students can also write their stories and have others read them. I think what I'm trying to say here is it is important that the texts come from a variety of sources. So, like from the students themselves is an example of that. Um, Other than that, I take text from anywhere to develop literacy. It can be a really short text from an advertisement in a magazine, or a recipe, or a greeting card, or images with captions. For me, these are all great additional resources that add to the students' literacy development. 6. Do you use literacy as a tool to develop critical thinking among your students? Well, yes, I do. This to me is literacy is an excellent tool to help develop critical thinking. It's like a jumping off point a lot of the times. As I mentioned before, teaching students about the world around them through literacy is an excellent way to work on critical thinking. You can compare different points of views in articles, you can raise awareness, you can have the students solve a problem presented in a text. There are a great number of ways to have the students use literacy as a tool to develop critical thinking. Even though it may seem a bit more difficult to really develop critical thinking in young children, thinking like preschoolers, ages 6, 7, 8, it can be done, and literacy is helpful in this aspect especially. Okay, the last question. Question 7, how can we guide our students to interpret the world through literacy? Well, this is a much needed 21st century skill that we have to help our students develop and use. I think the main thing we have to do is help them and teach them to differentiate what comes from reliable sources, what doesn't. What is a reliable source? They are bombarded with just so many things. It's like information overload. But that doesn't mean that they necessarily know what is true and relevant and comes from a good source or a reliable source, and what isn't. they have to learn how to identify this in order to navigate the world in which they live. I would say another way is to encourage and inspire them to read more. Demonstrate to them all the knowledge they can gain through literacy. Show them how important it is and how it benefits them in their lives. One way is to have them produce something meaningful that others, particularly fellow students, others in the school, I don't know. I guess to that extent, that would be, the easiest for a teacher to do with them. Have them share with others to show them that their message had a purpose and made some kind of difference, whether very small or big. This lends itself to the task-based approach or project-based learning, which my Language Institute, their methodology is based on. So without promoting literacy in today's world, their message may not have carried on so far or made any kind of impact. And you can show them that through their own work. I know this is just a very general example, but it's an important basis to helping students develop and better their own literacy skills.